This is the City Sites Podcast with Larry Kutzler.
The Bible study came out of a place of desperation in 2014. I was going through a spot where I was questioning my faith. I didn't know if I wanted to consider myself a Christian anymore. I was looking at all these other religions where they took their faith so serious, where they took their prayer so serious. And you just don't see that with a lot of the church in America, at least today.
From struggle rapper to having a business that's sold tens of thousands of products is in almost every country in every state. We got Zach Windahl. Don't you go anywhere.
Things on my end, what is new? So I had a new book come out this week called See the Good. It's all about finding grace, gratitude, and optimism in your everyday life. I feel like it's so easy to be consumed by all the negative around us, and it kind of seems like the world is falling apart a lot of the times. But in reality, if you zoom out and really see how God is moving in the world, there's so much to be grateful for. And I believe that if you do so, if you see where God's moving and you focus on that, your life is going to be much more joyful and hopeful, and you're going to be just a happier person.
We are bringing a bold statement about Christ. He's our only hope to face the darkness in our day. Thanks for joining us for the City Sites Podcast.
You know, I love to talk to various generations to get their perspective about everything. I mean, I love to talk to them about culture, family, and especially to talk to them about God, because you never know. You get all kinds of different perspectives. And so today I have a special guest that I'm going to talk to him about those things. He's a young author who has been making quite a difference in the Christian publishing world recently, and he's here today to talk to me. Zach Windahl has a company called The Brand Sunday, which is unique in itself, and today our conversation will drill down into this young author's perspective on life, God, and family. I got to tell you, before I get in a conversation with Zach, that I first met him. He's the son of a good friend of mine, and we met for coffee in Roseville, Minnesota, and we talked about all kinds of things, and I could see that he was ready to do something great. He wanted to do something great, wanted to use his life influentially, but he didn't know what to do. And then he goes to Australia. He says, I'm going to Australia. I'm going to get trained by YWAM and DTS school or whatever. And that changed your life. Tell us what happened, Zach.
First off, thank you so much. And it's been so fun just sharing everything as we've grown and changed since meeting that first time in Roseville at that coffee shop. Wow, what a journey it's been.
I bet.
So yeah, I was in 2014, I was really kind of questioning my faith, trying to figure out what I believed, if I wanted to continue chasing after the faith of my childhood and making it more serious. And I decided that I was going to give it 2 years. So I ended up moving out to Australia to study the Bible in this really intense program. I chose that because you have so many people that are falling away from their faith, falling away from the church, and most of the time they're falling away because of people or the institution itself, and not falling away because of their relationship with the Bible or their relationship with God. And so I wanted to have a solid foundation in my faith and know that, okay, this is where it's coming from. It can't be shaken if my foundation is laid properly. And so I moved out to Australia to study in this School of Biblical Studies program where we would study 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. If it was Genesis week, for instance, you would read Genesis 5 times through over the course of 6 days.
Wow.
And then you would essentially write your own commentary on it. And so by the time I was done with this program, I had a commentary on every single book of the Bible, which is insane to have. And I had so many people reaching out to me saying that they wish they could go on a trip like I did, saying that they just couldn't have the time to or afford it. And I was like, man, I have something here with all my notes. Let me figure out how to hold people's hand as they read through the entire Bible to really encourage them in their faith and to encourage them in their relationship with God. And so that's when I wrote this book that you mentioned called The Bible Study.
And that's an incredible study. I've used used it. I've given it to my youth pastor. He's using it in his youth groups. It's an incredible 2 volumes. And tell us more about it. I mean, it's a little different. Well, first of all, the name is a little different. You know, when I first heard the name, I thought, way to go, Zach. That's really creative. The Bible study. I mean,
and then you saw how many copies we sold.
Yeah, I know. And I thought, well, he's not so dumb. But tell us more about the specifics. It's unique. Why is it so unique?
Sure. So it's a 2-volume set. It's a Old Testament and New Testament. And the goal is for you to essentially hold your hand as you read through the entire Bible. So at the beginning of the week, you would read the book of the Bible. So going on the Genesis example, you would read Genesis, the entire book, on your own time, whenever you are able to. And then you would go back through into the workbook and you're going to answer questions about what you read, and then also focus on how to make it personal to you. So there's a lot of like final personal applications in each book of the Bible. And it's not super in-depth. I don't share most of my views on things. It's pretty even across the board. So no matter what you believe, no matter what translation you want to use, it works for you because it's more focused on you doing the study yourself, and we're just here to guide you.
And it's kind of geared to a younger audience, even though older folks could enjoy it as well, correct?
I wouldn't say so necessarily. I think the design and the style of it is towards a younger audience, but I would say we have a massive following of older people as well. I've joined in on Zoom calls with groups of 60, 70-year-olds that are going through it just to pop in and say hi. And so we market towards a 25 to 34-year-old, but when it comes to who it's actually being used by, it skews older.
And it's wildly popular. I mean, I see it on Facebook all the time. I see your face on Facebook promoting it, of course, but it's wildly popular, correct?
It is. It's been incredible. Like, praise God. We've helped close to 500,000 people grow closer to God and encourage their relationship with the Bible. And I don't know if you knew this, but we actually sold the company like 4 months ago.
Oh, really?
We built it up. So we turned the Bible study into, it was called the Brand Sunday. And it was basically a bunch of other tools that help people grow in their faith. And so things like a planner, different variations of the Bible study. So a youth edition, a kids edition. We had icebreaker cards, things like that. And we built up the whole brand over the last 4 years. And we ended up selling all the products to Baker Publishing Group in October.
Well, that's incredible. See, I was going to ask you about the Brand Sunday because I thought perhaps that's your new book or your recently published book called Seeing the Good. But that's all on you now. It's not under the Brand Sunday, is it?
Totally. So we did See the Good with Bethany House Baker Publishing. And so I'm not technically in the publishing space anymore on my own. Now I'm partnered with one of the giants in the industry.
Oh boy, that makes a big difference.
So Inc. 5000 said that we were the 63 fastest growing business in America. And we were the number 3 fastest growing business in Minnesota. And ever since then was like, okay, it's grown to something that I have no idea what to do with. And it was clearly just God's hand of blessing on it. And so I realized that if I could partner with somebody that was in the space that was great in areas that I struggled, it would be a win-win situation. That's the new change of pace.
I'm so impressed. You are just an entrepreneur. Well, I read the book, the latest book you've written that's published, See the Good, subtitle, Finding Grace, Gratitude, and Optimism in Every Day. I was really enthralled with the title. As I started reading it, to be honest with you, I have a confession. After reading a few pages, I thought, oh no, not another one lost to the prosperity gospel. It seemed like everything was a positive, positive, positive. Yet I realized as I read further in the book that was not the case. So tell us what the difference in seeing the good in every day and the prosperity gospel, how do they differ?
Sure. I'm not an expert on the prosperity gospel at all, but from my understanding is that once you become a Christian, then your life is good and all of these things are given to you.
Right.
And some people agree with that. I don't necessarily. So See the Good is a book that's all based on shifting your perspective to see how God is moving in the world. And I think through that process, you're going to live a life that is actually much more joyful and filled with hope.
Well, I have to admit, as I read through the book, if I find your writing a little different, unique, it's playful, fun, it's fresh. And for example, you talk about the feasts of the Lord, which you find in Leviticus 23. And oftentimes that's preached and taught as something sort of, stoic. It's like everything's fairly serious. And you don't see it that way. You see it as celebration. It's a festival. Let's have a party. Tell us how you got to that.
I think so many aspects of our faith are just so serious because of what we've been raised around or all of the rules that we were taught when we were younger. And when you think about it, okay, God says in the spring, you need to celebrate 4 times, and in the fall, you need to celebrate 3 times. And some of these festivals are a week long where you aren't supposed to work or do anything else except for enjoy life. And we look at them and try to make some huge theological comparison to them, which there are for sure, but we can't disregard the basic of how amazing that is. I think in the US at least, partying is seen as drinking and drugs and going crazy. But in reality, like if you remove all of that, all of what society says it is, the celebrations are enjoying life, having really good food, having really good wine, dancing, laughing, playing, enjoying your life. And so when God says, hey, I want you to take a break 7 times a year for a day to 7 or 8 days and just enjoy life, that would be transformational for most of us, I think. Like I try to go on vacation once a year, but that's for like 5 days. Can you imagine doing it 7 times throughout the year and just making a pace in your life based around that? And I think God is just saying, enjoy what I've given you. Don't have an evacuation theology where you're just holding on to be able to one day get out of here and leave to the sky. I think God is saying, no, I've given you something. Groom it, take care of what I've given you, enjoy the life I've given you, because one day I'm going to redeem the earth and it's going to be a new heaven and a new earth, and you're going to be living out all your dreams essentially.
Well, you really changed my attitude about those feasts. I'm looking at them now. In fact, I did a podcast today with another pastor and we were talking about that. And I said, hey, those are party times. He looked at me and I said, well, Zach Windahl says so it must be. So anyway, it's fun. But here's the other one that I thought was very good, and that is the grumpy Jesus. And
totally,
you have a friend, or you had a friend, or have a friend that had an apartment that's one wall was filled with all the art that shows grumpy Jesus, and you didn't even want to be in that house next to that wall because you don't see a grumpy Jesus. Tell us more.
Totally. Yeah, it's so funny. I went to a Christian college and I fell away from my faith the most when I went to a Christian college. But one of my friends had a house and he would collect thrift store paintings of Jesus. So he would put them on his wall, and his entire wall was just pictures of Jesus, all these classic photos of him. And you would walk in the house and you would immediately not want to be in there because Jesus was looking at you with a stern look, with a judgmental look, with a stoic look. And it was never enjoyable or inviting. And I think I had to go through this process that I think a lot of people need to go through is maybe you grew up walking down the hallways of your church and there's these old paintings and Jesus is looking at you with a little bit of a glare.
Totally.
You feel like your entire life is trying not to upset Jesus. And so when you read the Bible and you read the gospel message, you're viewing it from that aspect. But in reality, why would women and children and all these people want to be around Jesus if he was just walking around telling you that you're living your life wrong? It wouldn't draw you in or invite you by any means. So I really believe that Jesus was joyful. He smiled a lot, like he was full of the joy of the Lord. I think a lot of the parables that he told were actually had like joke undertones in them, and people would have laughed at them. But for us to read it today, they aren't necessarily funny because we don't understand the cultural context. But if a bunch of kids are surrounding Jesus and they just want to be around him enjoying life, there's got to be something different here that we're missing.
I would agree with you. I think we sometimes have a very somber feel about the Gospels, almost like a funeral, and it's not that at all. And if we're going to attract people, we have to attract people to Jesus in a happier, more joyful way, right?
Absolutely. I think the American church needs to have a little bit of a shift there, because it's very much like, you come in, we're saving you from hell, instead of like, hey, we really do believe that your life is going to be better. Because if you're in community, if you're more grateful, if you participate in worship and the typical Christian experience, all those things are going to make your life better. They aren't necessarily like a prosperity gospel, but being surrounded by other people and confessing your sins is going to make your life better. It's just the way that it is.
One of the chapters dealt with the idea that you may have a bad day, or you may grieve, and so forth. And that doesn't mean that we just ignore those times. You do celebrate those or allow those to take place. But then you come back to center yourself again on the goodness of God. Is that correct?
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of things in life suck. I think a lot of things are tough, and people have bad days all the time. I have bad days. I have bad moments. Life is hard. And I'm never saying that we should disregard the bad things that are happening in our life, but I think it's important to have a big picture perspective of those bad things in our lives, as well as just the bad things happening to us. If 10 things happen to us in a day, 9 of them are good or neutral, and 1 of them is bad, we count it up as a bad day, when in reality it was a pretty good day, just with 1 bad situation. And so I think by zooming out and putting everything into perspective, it'll change our relationship with our days.
So what kind of response have you had from the overall book itself? Do people say, hey, this is a great read, it's too simple, it's not real, or man, this changed my life? What do you get?
It's been a lot of, wow, thank you for a breath of fresh air. It's been a lot of, man, I thought it was going to be very simple, but you really did dive into a lot of scripture in it. You did dive into the Hebrew behind things, and I learned a ton. I think it's been more surprising than anything else. Just like you said, in the first chapter, you expected it to go one way, and it shifted your mindset on it as you read the rest of it. I think that's been the overall consensus.
Sometimes I think theology plays a part in certain ways that we see our churches and we see ourselves, and sometimes that theology gets to be really muddled. Sometimes it divides people, doesn't bring them together. You're on 2 different sides of the issue. And I've learned the older I get, the more I want to be having a simpler life. You declutter your life, you downsize, and you try to figure out life from a different perspective. I think that's what this book does, or it did for me. It made me realize that the simplistic and the simple things in life are really where your treasures are, and it brought a different perspective to me.
Sure. We get so caught up in going to church and listening to sermons and reading books on theology and filling ourselves with knowledge. But in reality, like, we're supposed to be living out our faith more so than just learning about our faith. And so I think if we're only learning and we're never doing it, then we've missed the mark completely. And so just like you, I want to love the people around me better. I want to take care of the environment better. I want to feed the hungry. I want to give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, and do all the things that Jesus commands us to do, instead of just learning about why he says to do all those.
And I think you need to also add something to that. You need to help Larry publish his first book.
Done. Good deal.
I can get an endorsement from Zach Windahl. Oh, it's a bestseller.
Easy.
I did a podcast earlier this morning with a pastor, and we were talking about wisdom. As I read this passage, I thought of you, and I thought of the book, See the Good, because there's wisdom in this. Let me just say that it's taken from James chapter 3, where it defines heavenly wisdom. And he says that wisdom that's God's perspective, it's pure, it's peace-loving, considerate, it's submissive, it's full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. And I thought for the first time, this isn't just a statement of fact, it's behavior, and it's all positive. Everything is positive with the wisdom that comes down from God. And I said, that's the book. See the good.
Come on.
I mean, isn't it?
For sure.
I mean,
100%.
I think I endorse this book, Zach. I have thought that, I've read a lot of books in my life, but I think this is one that really is fresh for me. And I'm going to marinate on it, meditate on it as I continue to process what you're saying here. And I'm really thankful that you wrote it. What else you got to say?
Thank you. That means the world, honestly. I'm honored that you read it and you took the time and you wanted to chat about it. I never take it lightly.
How do people get a hold of the book, or do you do speaking engagements? Tell us more about Zach and how he deals with all of this.
Totally. A culmination of everything, books, speaking. I'm doing trips to Israel once or twice a year. First one's in March, which is super excited for that. All that's available at zachwindahl.com. Social media, Instagram, TikTok, Zach Windahl, and then the books are on Amazon and everywhere else.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a joy to get your perspective on things, and we want to recommend people to pick up the copy of See the Good, and it's published by
Bethany House Baker Publishing.
All right. Thanks, Zach.
Our culture is confused, and that confusion is spilling over into everything today. God is never confused, and those who know Him and obey Him are never confused. Confusion is a cause of not knowing the truth, but here on this program, we untangle our culture's confusion with the truth. Thanks for listening. Thank you for joining us today. Every Friday, we bring you this podcast with interviews with people who are challenging the status quo of Christianity and challenging the cultural norms of our day. Please help us get the word out by sharing the link to this podcast with your online friends and family. Our website also contains other podcasters who are part of the City Sites network of communicators, all sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. Our website is citysitesurbanmedia.com.
This is the City Sites Podcast Network.